everybody, Anthony and Bob Barker are back again for another build. This time we're making a cabinet for the inside of my cousin's detailing van. There was an interesting problem to solve, so let's get into it. So my nephew came to me and asking for help to build a cabinet in this area right here inside of his van that he uses for his detailing business. So we got in there, got some careful measurements, jumped up on SketchUp, and kind of just got a good idea of what he was looking for that's going to help him with storage, and of course we got to building. And for this, the whole point was one, to get him some better storage, make things a little bit more efficient for him, and also he just wanted to fill in that space so there's not a direct line going from the front of the van to the back, just also for a little bit of security purposes too. So for this one, it's going to be a kind of a fast and easy build, but it was a little unique, kind of trying to figure out how exactly we're going to get it into that space. There's no really good places to connect it. Things aren't exactly completely straight or plumb. So you have to kind of adjust for all of that as you're building it. So what we decided to do is we were putting 3 drawers on the bottom and then some opening shelves on the top. The reason why we ended up doing that is because this does protrude a little bit to the front, and that setup is going to give us a little bit deeper for the drawers and actually gives them a little armrest. But then it's also shallower up high, that way it doesn't obscure his vision when he's looking around. And then the other big issue is how we're actually going to connect it to the space. Now there is kind of like that metal divider on each side right behind the seats, so my plan was to basically just screw it into that, and that should hold it. But of course it won't make for the most aesthetically pleasing connection. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a face frame, and that's going to kind of overlap onto that, so that'll hide that joint well. So it's going to really look more like it's a complete built-in, like it's always been there. So I'm approaching this pretty much like all the other cabinets I've made, although we are using more screws here because in the end he is going to end up painting everything. So this will all be hidden, so we can just do some screws and then go ahead and just put some wood filler on top of it, and then you're never going to notice that once it's fully finished. And the part that we're adding right here, this is going to be the top platform. That's going to be the transition from the drawers up to the upper shelves. So you can see how it narrows up there towards the top and it's thicker on the bottom. And now, like when we're putting in that top platform, I was considering just kind of making some dados and locking the wood in that way. But then I realized this is going to be just as strong with some glue and some extra screws there. And like I said, you'll never see them. So I use that as an excuse to be lazy and not throw my dado stack back onto my table saw. And that really did kind of save some time with the build. And as we're doing this, it was actually kind of nice to have my nephew around, because I'm so used to doing these projects by myself under the careful eye of my shop supervisor. But having him around was kind of nice for some extra company. He even jumped in and started doing some of the stuff himself, although the shop supervisor forgot to give him some ergonomic tips there, so he was kind of stretching a little too far. So continue cutting stuff out, and now we're going to be locking in the back of the cabinet. For this one, we're just adding more of 3/4 inch plywood. That's going to keep it nice and just completely sturdy, and it'll keep it square. And the reason why I went with the more beefy wood there for the backer is because that's going to give him something very sturdy to hook things into if he wants to create extra storage with that in the front. So he can add on kind of shelves or any other type of things he wants to on there just for a little extra storage. So after that's on, now we're going to go ahead and just put in the shelves. That's going to be for the upper part of the storage. And like I said, for this one, we're doing the same thing. We're just lining it up, gluing it in place, and then we're going to add some screws to totally lock it in. And then just like we did on the lower section, we're going to be putting that beefy 3/4 inch backer on there, like I said, to keep it square and to give him options for additional storage in the front later. And then I am going to be adding a few extra screws too, straight through that into the back of the shelf, just to make sure that the thing is going to be extra sturdy, although it's not going to be holding very heavy weights anyways, but never hurts to overdo it. And with that, the basic cabinet is essentially done. There's a little bit of finish work, like Softening the edges with a round over, sanding it, and of course adding in the wood filler to cover up all those screw holes. But other than that, it's essentially done until he decides for the paint later. So that means next up is making the drawers. And like I said, we'll be making 3 of them, so we're going to get all of our pieces cut down. And then as far as the design of the drawers, like how we're going to be making them, I kind of go different ones depending on my specific use. For this one, we had 2 requirements. One, I wanted to really maximize the storage space. And 2, with the way the design goes, it's just easier to do the side mount slides for these ones. So what we're going to end up doing is getting all our pieces together and then putting a rabbet cut on the bottom of all of those, and that's going to give enough room just to put our bottom piece just directly into that, and that'll kind of lock it all together. And then you won't have the 1/2 inch space that you would normally have below the bottom piece that you do for the undermount slides. So that's going to increase a little bit of the extra storage for there, and it'll simplify the build. And like usual, I'm going to do some pocket holes on the front and the back just to add some extra strength to it. And like always, you'll never see them. And it is always easier to sand these pieces before you put them together. Otherwise, it's just like a nightmare trying to do it once it's assembled. And typically I would start to try to do some finish on there. However, I think he's going to cover it in like a fabric. So we're going to leave that alone and let him take care of that later. So now we're coming over to assembling the drawers, and I got another new toy, got a pin nailer here. So this is the first time actually using that pin nailer, but it actually did help out a lot on assembling these drawers. I just put a couple pins just to kind of keep it in place long enough so everything's lined up well. Although I do got to get used to it a little bit because I missed right there, so I had to take it apart, yank out the pin, and then redo it. But yeah, now that I got used to it after doing a few of these drawers, that's not a problem anymore. And that holds it pretty nice. That way I don't have to fiddle with it as I'm driving in the pocket hole screws, which is going to be the last piece that's going to be totally locking this together. And then with these type of drawers, I usually just do a quick check just to make sure it's square, and then throw in the bottom piece. And I'm going to be using my staple gun here. Just to completely lock that in so it's never going to go anywhere. And if you do need to adjust it, like before you put those staples in is the perfect time. So next up, we're going to be installing the cabinet into there. And it was so tight, I couldn't really get any good shots of it, but you can kind of see a little bit. Basically, we're just kind of screwing it into a little filler piece I attached to those metal dividers, and it ended up holding it really sturdy. We were able to kind of do a small little shim on the bottom, and it sit pretty plumb, so that thing is not going to move. So the next up is making the face frame that's going to just clean the whole thing up, and will cover up those joints and just kind of give it a much more intentional feel. And you'll notice that these pieces for the face frame are pretty darn chunky. And the whole point of that is because this is going to be sitting inside a vehicle that's moving, and he's going to be putting some bottles and stuff in those upper shelves. So we wanted to be high enough where they're not going to fall out with, fast movements. So for those ones, it's going to be covering the actual shelf, and then it's going about 2.5 inches above it. And we kind of tested that out with the bottles that he has in there. It's plenty enough where you can have a lot of movement in those bottles and they're not going to pop off, but it's still easy enough to put them in and out for use. So that was the kind of the sweet spot for us. And of course, we're going to add some little round overs just to soften it up and sand it down. And then what we ended up doing is just gluing it and using some pin nails to attach it to the cabinet, which we didn't get any good shots of that because, like I said, it was so tight in there, all you would really see is my back. And I don't think that's the most entertaining video. So after we did that, the last part was just to finish up with the drawers. So I'm just mounting on the hardware for the slides onto the lower edges of it, mainly just because it was nice and easy. And when I mounted these inside the cabinet, I just used a couple just cut off spacers just to line it up onto the cabinet itself. And then that makes it nice and easy. I do have plenty of other videos that show that process if you're actually curious about it. Then after that, we cut out a few more pieces for the drawer faces, and we are using Baltic birch, so the edges look pretty nice, and we decided not to edge band those. We just softened them up, and I used my other new toy just to line up all these drawer pulls and get those into place. And then that was pretty much the end of the build. Once we got it in, he tested it out for a few days, and everything worked perfectly. There's enough tension in the drawer slides where they don't open up when he's driving around, and everything else stays in place, and it works out really well. So that's going to be it for this one. I hope you guys liked the video. Leave us a comment down below what you think, and we'll see you in the next one.